Sometimes just patience and a smile can change the whole world. The nightlife in the city was as busy, noisy, and lively as usual. This was a bar known throughout the neighborhood, a comfortable refuge for anyone wanting to enjoy a drink, with different people, unusual conversations, and of course, a place for everyone to unwind. But tonight, no one could have predicted that everything would be different. Inside the bar, there was a calm atmosphere. The music was playing softly, and a few people were chatting around some tables. At a corner table, a woman was sipping her drink alone. She was a black woman, dressed casually but elegantly, completely unbothered by the surrounding noise, drinking her beverage while scanning the bar. She seemed peaceful, focused on something, but no one knew who she was. The woman gently raised her drink and took a sip. People around her were settling at their tables, engaging in quiet conversations with the bartender. For the regulars of the bar, everything seemed ordinary. But tonight, an unexpected man would walk in. The door opened, and a man named Steve stepped inside. He looked around, nodded to himself, and made eye contact with the bartender. The man was dressed in a stylish shirt, but no matter how fancy his clothes were, he looked out of place among the others. His face wore a cold expression. Steve, with nervousness in his eyes and anger in his mind, slowly walked up to the bar. His eyes landed on the woman, and he turned to the bartender behind the counter. "Give me a beer," he said. Then he looked around at the people in the bar, but pointed specifically at her. "Anyone who wants a drink except for her can have one." The bartender was surprised by these words, but immediately began preparing the drink without saying anything. The woman gave a brief glance at his words. She showed no reaction. She smiled slowly and continued sipping her drink. Everyone was watching her unresponsively, but she quietly looked at him and said nothing. Soon, the people in the bar started to hide their reactions. Unfortunately, the words spoken by Steve didn't bother anyone much. Everyone took their drinks and shifted their attention away from the woman. Steve, unable to tolerate her lack of reaction, shouted once again, "The new drinks are on me, but not for that woman. Again, she doesn't count." At that moment, people at a few tables glanced at her with disapproving looks. The woman, however, remained silent. With a slight smile, she raised her drink into the air. Many people didn't quite understand the meaning of her gesture, but the bartender said nothing. Steve was getting angrier. Her calm response was driving him insane. "Why aren't you responding?" he yelled, staring at her and continuing to shout. "You still won't serve her, will you? Go ahead." Steve's anger was growing more intense. The woman's lack of response was only making him angrier. She tilted her head slightly and continued to watch Steve silently. He couldn't understand why she wasn't reacting. Being ignored so easily made him feel belittled. But since the woman smiled at him, he didn't get any reaction from her. People started hearing the frustration in Steve's voice. A few customers, unwillingly, looked at the woman and shook their heads, but no one dared to say anything against Steve's words. Despite Steve yelling again, the woman only smiled and drank more of her beverage. Her patient demeanor was surprising the people at the other end of the bar. A bit later, Steve yelled again, "The drinks are on me except for that woman." This time, everyone seemed a little more uncomfortable because his tone was much louder and harsher than before. Seeing that Jasmine was still unbothered, Steve decided to walk up to her. As he quickly approached her, the woman remained calm, looking at him in the same composed manner. Steve reached her and asked, "Why aren't you responding?" As Steve approached her, looking even angrier, Jasmine continued to smile patiently. While Steve waited for her response, he stared at her, but she said nothing. He took a deep breath and waited for her to speak. Then Jasmine slowly raised her head and smiled. "Thank you," she said quietly, with a small smile on her face. Steve could no longer tolerate her response. "After all this, I really need to know who you are. Why are you so silent?" he shouted. The woman finally stepped forward, taking the first step in revealing her identity, but Jasmine's calm demeanor only made him angrier. Finally, the woman spoke. "I own this bar, my friend." Jasmine smiled calmly. Steve, looking at her in astonishment, took a sip of his drink and said, "You're the owner? How can you act like this?" Jasmine responded again, "Does it bother you that I'm the owner of this bar?" She then glanced at the other people in the bar and said, "Sometimes just seeing someone and being patient shows a person's true power." Steve, sitting down in disbelief, was confronted with her calmness and composure. Jasmine had delivered her message in a calm and patient manner, which Steve began to realize. After a while, Jasmine's calm and composed demeanor truly showed everyone where real power lies. Steve had lost his anger, and his shame left him speechless. The woman looked at him gently, maintaining her usual smiling demeanor. Many of the customers finally started to support Jasmine and applauded her. She had won over the man, proving the power of showing respect. It wasn't just a moment of conflict inside the bar. Jasmine had demonstrated that true power doesn't come from anger, but from patience and respect. Steve's rage and racism had been rendered meaningless in the face of her calm and composed attitude. Her patience and smile made her stronger than everything else. The bar owner, perhaps for the first time, reminded everyone of who she was and what mattered. True strength doesn't come from anger, but from respect and patience. Jasmine had not only taught the man, but also the whole audience an important lesson. It's not about words, but about attitude and maturity, and perhaps most importantly, the real strength within every person is measured not by their external appearance, but by their inner composure. Jasmine's way of calmly resolving this issue sent a different message. Sometimes just patience and a smile can change the whole world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts with us in the comments, and let's continue discovering what true power and humanity mean in our next video. Remember, respect, patience, and maturity always win. See you in the next video.